I'm going to speak a little quicker because I want to leave as much time as possible for our Q&A. So let me introduce you again to Professor Stefaan De Henauw. He will be in charge of the moderation of this debate and make this Q&A session as interesting as possible for all of you. So Stefaan, if you're ready, we are as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Sophie. And of course, as we announced at the beginning, we will now proceed to the Q&A. Of course, there is only 15 minutes left for this discussion, so I've just tried to pick the most the questions that came quite often in the picture. And of course, we will try to find a way to address the questions that we cannot discuss today. We will try to find a way to at least give some response to the people who have posted these questions. So a first question that I guess would first go to Tim is coming back to this Jevon paradox, in which there seems to be this vicious cycle between the demand and the supply, and then from the supply back to the demand. And the question that came back quite a few times is, what is the role of the individual in this whole picture? Because it seems that we are here in the West, we are so very much used to having high quality food, so much choices. So we are in a way spoiled. And how is it still possible to change that, if that is a problem at all? So this question would first go to Tim, but of course all the other speakers would be invited to comment on that as well.
Thanks, Stefaan, and apologies if my internet cuts out. There is a real problem with
I'm afraid we lost Tim. I'm not sure if I'm the only one.
Yes.
I cannot hear you, Tim.
Hello. Let me try again, because it's cutting out every 30 seconds or so. Let's try a quick answer. There's a problem with putting all the onus on the consumer, because very often it is a food environment problem. As one of the other speakers talked about, there is not everybody doesn't have free choice. The issue is a systemic issue.
Yeah, I'm afraid we're cut again. Yeah. Perhaps, Tim, if you agree, maybe you can hear us, but perhaps I can suggest that some of the other speakers come in. Perhaps, Mats, you would like to comment also?
Yes, I will indeed. And yeah, what I try to show is that there are a lot of policy options available that can change consumer demand, because we can't just rely on improved efficiency in the food system to solve these problems, as we saw with Tim's example from dairy in New Zealand, for instance, and we have relied on that for a while. So I think the best option for us is to embrace policies to shape demand and focus more of our effort there in order to make sure that we have enabling environments that allows us as consumers to do the right thing without thinking too hard about it. At the moment, you have to be a really clever consumer to do the right thing. We need policies and science to work together to create enabling environments that makes the correct choice, the easy choice, not necessarily just by giving good advice, but also making sure that the sustainable, healthy products are the ones that are that development is put into these areas, etc. So we need to create a marketplace that makes it so easy that we don't really think about doing the right thing. We simply can't solve these problems without significant changes to the way we interpret food demand and the way we work policy-wise on food demand.
Okay, thank you very much, Mats. Perhaps Katrien or Marjolein, you would like to comment also on this question? What is the role of the individual?
Yes, I would like to add on this. I think, honestly, in a food system, all the actors have a role to play. And as Matt said, I think policy-wise, there's a lot that can be done. And that's mainly important to help mainstream solutions and mainstream movements that are already going on. The pioneering role will usually not come from the policy level, but from the niche system, which was presented in one of the slides this morning. So you have different roles to take, and as a government also, you can see what dynamics are out there and which aren't, and how can we push the system faster and accelerate the movement that is going on, and where you can you enforce systemic change through legislation. And I think for impacting individuals' behavior, I think nudging is very powerful, which is, for example, a tax on unhealthy food might help make healthy food less expensive than the unhealthier choice. And having these different price settings will make it's part of the food environment and will push people to make the right choice. So you can play with the system, you can use your legislation tools, you can use spatial planning, you can use marketing and awareness campaigns, you can use education, etc., all to influence how individuals make their choices. And of course, they have a role to play, but the governments have a role to play, the businesses have a role to play, the schools have a role to play, etc. And it all interrelates and influences one another. So it's part of this food system. But my experience is that usually legislation is not leading the way, but is following once there is already some pioneering work being done, and then there's a mainstreaming role for the government.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrien. I don't know if Marjolein also wants to come in here. If not, I think I can go to the next question. Another question that came up quite a few times is about the role of organic farming. I think that Tim has more or less illustrated that that is not a sustainable solution on a global scale, if I understood correctly, but it seems that in the questions there was quite a bit of reaction on that. So I would like to hear from the speakers here today, what do you think that the role of organic farming could be, given the fact that, for instance, the whole issue about pesticides that Marjolein has brought up, and also in relation to food waste, because someone from the audience stated that if we could combat food waste in an efficient way, then probably organic farming would be sufficient to sustain feeding the world population. So yeah, any comments on that? Who would like to go first? I can see now that Tim is back. Yes, please, Tim, take the floor again.
Sorry about that. I rebooted my computer and it seems to be a bit better. Well, the issue is that if everybody in the world chose to eat organically, we would need significantly more land than we currently use under agriculture, which would be unsustainable in the systemic sense. So if we ate deliberatively, if we ate less, if we wasted less, if we change the footprint of what we eat, there is a very clear role for organic farming or agroecological approaches in general, but it's got to replace the other forms of farming, and it's also got to be associated with dietary change. So if we just change our diets, change our demand for organic and do not change our diets, it is unsustainable because of the yield penalty that goes with organic. So that's why in my talk I talked about eating less eating differently and then eating organically, because then there is space to do that. But we have to eat less and eat differently. We can't just everybody eat organically, because then that would just drive more deforestation and so on around the world. We have to change away from a commodity-rich diet into a more sustainable, more diverse, more animal-integrated diet collectively, to allow organic to be the predominant farming method. Over.
Thank you. Anybody? Yeah, Mats, you would like to come in? Yes, please.
Yeah. If we're again focusing on the kind of like the niche I showed you earlier, organic have been very much the niche, and hopefully with, for instance, the EU Farm to Fork strategy, we can see that organics has been heralded as one of the niche solutions that can perhaps be more mainstreamed. I find two really important things about organics and food system transformation. One is that organics allow the consumer to pay for the ecosystem services. So instead of us taxpayers through intricate subsidies finding some way to pay farmers to do the right thing, well, this allows farmers to do at least some of the right thing when it comes to biodiversity, etc. And the consumers are paying the premium for it. So it gives farmers an incentive to do the right thing from the marketplace. So that's really nice. We can see that consumers are, with farmers in Denmark, for instance, dairy farmers, organic dairy farmers are making more money than conventional. So it's a clear market signal that allows consumers to buy and send signals in the market. And the other part is that we can see, at least in Denmark, that usually people buying organic products are also changing their diets accordingly, because meat is more expensive. Organic meat is way more expensive than conventional meat. So you need to rebalance your diet if you go organic. So in that way, it can also be like a vision for a concrete way of stimulating a vision for the future diets in the near to medium term. So I think organics is a really important niche to stimulate, and it can show at least some of the way. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it definitely more organics is better.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Marjolein, yes, please.
Yes, I agree with what Tim and Matt said. I would like to add that there is a persistent confusion between organic farming and agroecological farming, in the sense that organic farming could be lived as an industrial enterprise as well, and more organic farming is taking that pathway towards like another form of conventional farming driven by the scale enlargement paradigm. Whereas agroecology puts the farmer in the center and realizes much more than just organic farming proponents, that if we are losing our farmers because we can't offer them a decent life, there won't be any society anymore. So there has to be a political way to not only promote organic farming and farming more respectful for life, but also a way to convince people to take up farming again as a profession, which means promoting downscaling the size of the farm operations. And that's really radical. It seems almost impossible, but if you think about it, just a few farms ruling the world because they have everything that we need to survive as a species is not sustainable, whether it's organic or not.
Okay, thank you. That's a clear statement. Perhaps turn to another dimension that has come up a few times, and that probably is also an important element in this whole discussion. What is the role of GMOs, gene editing, as a way to obtain crops that are better suited for local growth under wet conditions under conditions that are different from the original climate where these crops are grown? In other words, if we want to grow bananas in Scotland, for instance, I don't know if it's possible at all, but this is what seems to be suggested. What is the role of this GMO alternative? Is there anybody who would like to comment on that? I guess it's a very complex issue. Yes, Tim?
So I think we have to ask the question, what do we want to grow, as well as where do we want to grow it? From multiple dimensions, growing a different range of crops, particularly a diversity of fruit and vegetables and root vegetables and so on, would be beneficial. And we don't necessarily need biotechnology to enhance commodity crops. So the first question I would say is, why not think about a diversity of crop products rather than just engineering the existing products which underpin our cheaper food paradigm and all the rest of that. So I would say it's, certainly there'll be places where we can vastly increase the speed at which we can adapt to changing climates and pests and diseases. But I would say, let's think first about changing our farming system and growing a different range of things that are more suited to the environment that we find ourselves in, rather than engineering engineering traits into crops that are already giving us negative outcomes.
Thank you. I saw that Mats and Marjolein also raised their hands. Would you like to add something to that? Go ahead.
I can just add here in the UK, the government is kind of like trying to reopen the debate, and there are of course new technologies with CRISPR and new ways of doing GMO. But I actually think the European position, where you think, well, this is not the development path we want to spend time on. We have solutions without the GMO. Let's start there. That would be my advice, instead of just making another entrenched discussion where we can lob arguments upon one another, instead of starting to just build progress together. I think it's also politically, it's just a detour, because it'll just lead to more conflict rather than generate the momentum and like for change that we need. So I wouldn't go there if I was to choose.
Thank you. That is also a very clear statement. Marjolein, would you like to add something?
Yes, as expected, I agree. I agree that it's not the way to go, but it has been the way to go for years, for decades. And it's just like cheap food, it's just a false promise. GMOs are part of the problem, not of the solution, as far as I can see. I don't know of any variety that has brought some interesting aspects that haven't been broken immediately by the parasites or the pathogens they were designed to resist. There is an energy question also. To bring a new variety on the market that has some gene editing in it is extremely costly, not only in money terms, but also in energy terms. We're trying to get rid of fossil fuels, try to imagine GMOs in a fossil fuel free world. It's just impossible, because the embedded energy of those organisms is gigantic. And third, it's again a way of taking away skills of farmers, de-skilling them, for example, to produce their own seeds, or at least to have access to seeds that have some genetic variability in them. GMOs are typically genetically uniform, designed to be bought and bought and bought again, year after year after year. So it's about patenting and intellectual property rights more than anything else. So I don't see at all how this can give even a tiny bit of a solution towards sustainability.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's time to wrap up. Our time is up. So I think we will wrap up here. I would like to point out that there has been a lot of very positive comments in the chat during the presentations. I would like to thank all the speakers for the really excellent presentations, brilliant and very good ideas. I think it has been an eye-opener for many people, these presentations. And to the audience, I would like to say that, of course, there were much more questions. We're not able to address them here, but we will try to find a way to address them somehow, send them back to the speakers, and maybe try to find a way to also bring them back to you, to the audience. And finally, I also, of course, want to thank the audience for all their constructive comments in the chat. And I hope you enjoyed it. Finally, I would like to thank the technical staff for the excellent support to make it happen today, because doing this as an online event is really not an easy thing to do. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time on another occasion.